Today marks 30 years since one of the most destructive natural disasters to ever hit the Bay Area, the deadly East Bay Hills firestorm.
I can still feel the heat of the flames as I fled.
The memories are still fresh for so many people who managed to escape that inferno that forever changed the landscape in the Oakland and Berkeley Hills. Good evening. I'm Julie Hayner.
And I'm Andre Sr. in for Frank Somerville. The destructive firestorm was whipped up from embers of a brush fire that started on this day in 1991. The next morning, the fire raged through the Oakland-Berkeley Hills. It killed 25 people and destroyed some 3,000 homes and apartments.
Today, survivors of that fire, as well as firefighters, reflected on the lessons learned.
And KTVU's Rob Roth joins us in the studio with what has changed in the last 3 decades. Rob.
Well, Andre, even after 30 years, the Oakland Fire Department continues to upgrade its wildfire safety procedures. They say a lot has changed since 1991, but there's still plenty of room for improvement. To look at the East Bay Hills now, it's hard to imagine the devastation that ripped through here 30 years ago and went on for miles.
I can still feel the heat of the flames as I fled.
Sue Piper lost her home on Hillard Drive that day, one of 3,000 destroyed by a wildfire that also killed 25 people. Piper chairs the Fire Safe Council. Its mission is to encourage residents to make their homes and property as fire safe as possible.
And you're at the mercy of the least prepared neighbor. If that house on the street has not created defensible space, the whole block is in jeopardy.
Assistant Fire Chief Robert Lipp was an Oakland firefighter that day 30 years ago.
It was so overwhelming and so busy that we truly were just going and driving until we found something that we felt like we could have a positive outcome on.
Lipp says the fire department now has vehicles that are skinnier, better to navigate narrow roads.
The smaller vehicles are more nimble. They also have four-wheel drive capability, and they have the capability to pump water as they drive versus having to be parked.
Technology has brought better communication between the department and other fire agencies and between the department and the community.
We are definitely more proactive with what we do when we're putting patrols out much more regularly. Every time we have a red flag warning.
The fire department says vegetation management by Oakland Hills residents reached 93% compliance this year, the highest it has ever been. But in an area so volatile, Piper says neighbors need to go beyond just being in compliance.
And a lot of people, maybe they feel overwhelmed, but they're just not ready to take that next step.
Fire officials agree, but they do see improvement.
When you look through most of that hill area and threat zone, we are way better than we have been in the past.
The Oakland Fire Department urges people in the area to have 2 or 3 escape routes in mind and to practice driving them, because in a wildfire, often just escaping can be the hardest part. Andre?
Yeah, Robin, speaking of escaping, you also got trapped in the fires. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, well, there was the fire was raging. We had no place to go, and the smoke was everywhere, and we weren't sure. My photographer Nick Soares and I weren't sure what to do. And at that point, really, a fire truck came out of the smoke, and Battalion Chief Jim Riley told us to hop on, so we did, and they just raced. They raced through Buckingham Boulevard to get away and start evacuating neighborhoods. And then, of course, Chief Riley passed away, minutes later. He'd gotten off the truck to help someone, and he never got back on. And we certainly send our condolences to his family on this day.
Yeah, just such a close call for you and your crew there. It just shows you how erratic and how fast these fires move. Looking at the cars and the images from that day, people trying to just get out of the area as fast as they could. Our camera people were right there with the firefighters. It's striking too how the flames jumped from one property and then totally missed one house, but then burned down another house. Talk about the aftermath, Rob, and how fast this fire flared up, because it started as like a grass fire and it wasn't completely put out, and then overnight it sparked back up and then erupted into this firestorm that we're looking at these pictures from 30 years ago.
Yes, Julie, the winds completely whipped up that fire, and it just blew it everywhere. And I remember seeing, speaking of embers, seeing an ember blow from one roof, and it kind of floated gracefully in the air for maybe 5 seconds, and it landed on another home, maybe 4 or 5 homes down from the original home. And within seconds, that house was completely engulfed, and within, I'd say, less than a minute, the house was totally gone. And those embers were just flying like that throughout that area for hours. And that's why we lost so many homes. It's really those embers.
Yeah, some 3,000 homes, just a devastating, devastating time. And those images just kind of bring it back all fresh in our minds. Rob, thank you.